On April 19, 2006, the United States men's national team were ranked number 4 in the world by FIFA. Yes, the US were ranked higher than the likes of Spain, France, Argentina, England, and Germany. You get the point. The USMNT were considered to be one of the world's best. Now, that might take you by surprise, but what if I told you that only 7 months later, in the November 2006 FIFA rankings, the US would drop to number 31 in the world? The US has been included in every FIFA men's world ranking since December of 1992, and today, we're going to dive into this topic chronologically, working our way up to present day. What's up, guys? My name is Brian McDonough, and welcome to this episode of State of Soccer. Before we get started and dive into the USMNT FIFA World Cup rankings history, I want you to do 2 things. Number 1, smash that like button. I'm really excited about this topic, and the more like it receives, the more YouTube will push it out to viewers just like you. And second, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to State of Soccer, where on this channel, we just discuss tons and tons of interesting topics pertaining to not only the USMNT, but also the growth of soccer here in the United States. So let's get started. Not to give you guys a complete history lesson here, but I think it's important to know that the FIFA rankings were not a thing until 1992. And being a USMNT fan, this is probably a good thing since the USMNT didn't qualify for a World Cup between 1950 and 1990. But we'll leave that topic for another day. So in 1992, FIFA decided that it would be kind of cool to rank all men's national teams in a global ranking. And despite their 40-year drought predating the official inaugural FIFA World Rankings in December of 1992, the USMNT were starting to make some moves on the international scene. The USMNT successfully qualified to the 1990 FIFA World Cup thanks to the famous goal heard around the world by Paul Caligiuri and the 1989 World Cup qualifier against Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, the same team that the US failed to beat in 2017, but we'll get there. This opened up the floodgates for the USMNT's success. This historic moment is oftentimes considered to be the greatest moment in United States men's national team history. So why does a World Cup qualifying goal in 1989 predating the 1990 World Cup or the 92 FIFA rankings matter? This goal allowed the USMNT to set their sights on competing with the world's best. So by the time the December 1992 inaugural FIFA World Rankings were published, the USMNT was ranked number 24 in the world. Kinda higher than I'd expect, but hey, we'll take it. The December 1992 USMNT featured a starting 11 that would be quite recognizable to any USMNT fan in present day. Many of these players, Tony Meola, Marcelo Balboa, Paul Caligiuri, Peter Vermees, Eric Winalda, Dominic Kinnear, and Kobe Jones are household names today for a number of reasons. Today you could argue that these players are somewhat widely considered as the founding fathers of modern day US soccer. So how did the USMNT get to number 24 in the world in the first ever ranking? Well, the 1992 King Fahd Cup was the last game played for the US prior to December 1992 FIFA World Rankings. The US qualified for this tournament following their 1991 Gold Cup championship, which was their first ever Gold Cup title, and the US would go on to beat the Ivory Coast 5-2, securing themselves a 3rd place finish in the tournament. Interesting fact for you State of Soccer subscribers, in later years this tournament would become known as the Confederations Cup. The next major event in this timeline of the USMNT ranking was the 1994 FIFA World Cup. The 94 World Cup was hosted here in the United States between June 17th and July 17th of 1994. On June 14th, 1994, the FIFA World Rankings were released only a couple days prior to the US World Cup. In these rankings, the USMNT was ranked at number 23, El-Tri was ranked at number 16, but the USMNT was poised to show the world what they could do on their home soil. I almost forgot to mention, I think it's cool to sprinkle in Mexico's global ranking from time to time, since we are regional rivals, and it's kind of fun to look back at the past. The 1994 World Cup was a great success for the US. The US would advance to the knockout stage where they would bow out against the eventual tournament champions, Brazil. The most famous match for the US during the World Cup was against Colombia, when the USMNT famously defeated them 2-1 at a sold-out Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. Now, our next milestone for the USMNT in the FIFA World Cup rankings comes during the February 28, 1998 edition of the World Ranking. The USMNT would reach then a record high number 12 in the World Rankings, and it was at this time, during the rankings, the US were coming fresh off a run to the finals in a memorable 1998 CONCACAF Gold Cup. For any of my older USMNT subscribers or viewers, you might remember this famous semi-final match where Casey Keller was just insane. He was insane against a stacked Brazil. The USMNT defeated then world-ranked #1 Brazil with the help of Casey Keller, who had 10 saves, primarily at point-blank range. The performance was so good that Brazil's superstar Romario stated it was the best performance in goal he's ever seen. The USMNT would then enter the 1998 World Cup in France with a new team record ranking of number 11 in the world. Unfortunately for the US, they would completely underperform during this World Cup, and the US would even fail to advance past group stage and drop 8 places, ranking number 19 following the World Cup. This would ultimately kickstart a freefall in the FIFA World Rankings for the US. The US would continue to drop another 12 places over the course of the next 12 months into 1999, and eventually find themselves ranked at number 31 in the June 16th, 1999 edition. Overall, the 90s for the US was a major success. Despite their abysmal performance at the 1998 World Cup, they were able to qualify for all 3 World Cups in the 90s and even host the World Cup on their home soil. If we are comparing them to El-Tri, the USMNT was substantially behind Mexico during the 1990s, but in time this would change. Let's now move into the 21st century. I'll turn my attention to the 2000s and will profile the best decade of soccer in my opinion for the US to date. The United States men's national team would start the 21st century ranked at a respectable number 22 in the FIFA World Rankings. And since it is the start of a new century for the USMNT, I would like to feature their starting lineup for the first game of the 2000s when the US took on Iran. This match was played in front of 50,000 plus at Rose Bowl. Bruce Arena was then the head coach, and the game resulted in a 1-1 draw. The first World Cup of the 21st century would then follow and be held only a couple years later in Japan and South Korea. The final FIFA World Rankings going into the World Cup were posted on May 15, 2002, and the US would be ranked at number 13. For further reference, Mexico was number 7. This World Cup performance for the USMNT was their best in modern history. The US would go on to make a run all the way to the quarterfinals of the 2002 World Cup. This United States team would not only beat the number 5 world-ranked Portugal in group stage, take down their main foe El-Tri in the round of 16, but they would eventually lose to Germany in a quarterfinal game that featured a terrible call. This was pre-VAR, where German defender Torsten Frings blatantly deflected the ball off the goal line with his left hand. In the next edition of the FIFA World Rankings, following the World Cup, the US would jump to number 10. But just to think how high they could have gone if they had beaten Germany in the quarterfinal match, I guess we'll never know. Following the 2002 World Cup, the USMNT would enjoy roughly a 4-year run leading up to the 2006 World Cup, where they would never drop below number 15 in the world. For the USMNT, these were certainly the glory years, up until now potentially. And during these 4 years span, the United States would position themselves to make a deep run in the 2006 World Cup. At the top of their game, and listen to this, the US would reach an all-time number 4 in the world leading up to the 2006 World Cup in Germany. With all this anticipation, certainly the US would avenge their unfortunate exit from the World Cup 4 years prior. And unfortunately, not. The US would fail to advance out of group stage in one of the most disappointing World Cups to date. The USMNT, ranked number 5 in the world at that ranking, would fail to even win a match. So what happened next? How did the USMNT respond to this disappointing performance in Germany? Well, they dropped really far in the FIFA World Rankings. In fact, by the end of 2006, the US would be ranked number 31 in the world. At that point, the only direction the US could really go was up. And I mean, they certainly did. The USMNT would then slowly creep its way up the world rankings, winning the 2007 Gold Cup and even finishing second at the 2009 Confederations Cup. Following their famous win over Spain in the 2009 Confederations Cup and an eventual 4-3 loss at the hands of champion Brazil, the USMNT would find themselves at number 12 in the world. With the end of the 2000s quickly approaching, the USMNT were gearing up for an appearance at the 2010 World Cup. And coming off a tremendous showing at the 2009 Confederations Cup in South Africa, the United States were poised to take this momentum into the World Cup. The US would be ranked number 14 going into the 2010 World Cup. They would be a couple of places ahead of El-Tri, and were ready to make up for the embarrassment back in 2006. Under then head coach Bob Bradley, the United States men's national team would be drawn into Group C. Their first match, which was quite memorable, would be against England, and it was a much anticipated bout. The USMNT were able to grind out a 1-0 draw due to Robert Green's famous blunder off the foot of Clint Dempsey in the 40th minute. Following this match, the USMNT would set their sights on the rest of Group C. In the end, the USMNT would end up winning the group. The US would tie Slovenia 2-2 in the second match, and in one of the most dramatic matches in USMNT World Cup history, the United States would defeat Algeria to advance into the round of 16. Thanks, Landon Donovan. Ultimately, the United States would be eliminated in the round of 16 by Ghana, and following the USMNT first knockout round appearance since the 2002 World Cup, the US saw their overall FIFA ranking increase by 1 spot to number 13 in the world. Over the course of the next couple of years following the 2010 World Cup, the USMNT would drop in the rankings. And similar to their slide following the 2006 World Cup, the red, white, and blue would see their worst ranking ever during the July 2012 FIFA rankings, only 2 years after their heroics at the 2010 World Cup. They were ranked number 35 in the world, if you can believe that, the lowest ranking ever for the US. And if you remember, it was at this time that the team was somewhat in a transitional period. Jurgen Klinsmann had taken over the helm of the USMNT, and they were caught between their success at the 2010 World Cup, and they were still in the wake of the 2014 World Cup. If you remember, it was also around this time that Jurgen Klinsmann began scouting players with American passports overseas. Do me a favor. I would like you to pay specific attention to the USMNT back four in this picture. This is the USMNT starting 11 versus Brazil on May 30th, 2012. The majority of these players would never feature again for the US or play at the 2014 World Cup. It was at this time that the US would follow this match with a tie against Canada in a friendly and draw against Guatemala in a World Cup qualifying match. These three matches caused the US to drop extremely far down into the rankings, and with the 2014 World Cup qualifiers underway, Klinsmann had to do something, and fast. On June 2nd, 2013, the USMNT would celebrate their centennial at RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C., almost exactly a year to the date from their 4-1 loss against Brazil. The USMNT were able to avenge their poor form. At the time of this match, the USMNT were ranked number 29 in the world. The Germans were ranked number 2, and unlike the match against Brazil, the starting 11 looked completely different. Carlos Bocanegra, Oguchi Onweyu, and Steve Cherundolo were nowhere to be found in the back line. Maurice Adu, Hercules Gomez, and Jose Torres were nowhere to be found in the attacking half. This team was entirely different, and it was after this match the USMNT would go on to win 11 games in a row. At this point in time, the USB ranked number 13 in the world. So let's fast forward to the next major event, the last World Cup the US qualified for, the 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil. Going into this tournament, the USMNT would be ranked at number 13 in the world, and for reference, L3 would be ranked at number 20. This tournament for the United States saw them advance once again to the round of 16, where they would get absolutely outplayed by now the number 1 team in the world, Belgium. If it wasn't for Tim Howard's heroics with 16 saves, this match could have easily been a blowout, and Wondolowski duffed that ball, but we don't have to go there. Ultimately, the US would advance to the round of 16, and following this World Cup, the US would be ranked number 15 in the world. Unfortunately for the US, this would be their last World Cup since they'd miss out on qualifying for the 2018 World Cup. So for sake of time, let's forward to that awful match versus Trinidad and Tobago. The date was October 10th, 2017. This is a date that will certainly be remembered as the worst performance in US soccer history. And for the sake of further embarrassment, I won't show the highlights, but rather a clip of Taylor Twellman freaking out.
If you can't get a result at Trinidad, you have no business being in the World Cup. They don't deserve to be there. That is fact, not opinion. And yet, after the game, you want to sit there, and all due respect, Bruce Arena doesn't want to answer questions, and I get that. And quite honestly, it's not his decision to make either. He's just the head coach that was brought in because Jurgen Klinsmann couldn't get the job done. But I look at that, and I'm sitting there going, there's an arrogance in our sport that I don't understand. I'm okay with the arrogance in basketball, in baseball, and in football, and in hockey, because the best leagues in the world in those sports are in our country. It is the exact opposite in soccer. And yet the American attitude, there's an arrogance. How do we have an arrogance? How do we have an arrogance? I don't understand that. And I'm not saying anyone with an accent knows more soccer than we do. That's not what I'm getting at. Jay, that stat on the last time the United States missed a World Cup is remarkable. We didn't have a domestic league in our country, Sage, until 1996. But if we're really addressing the issue, you can't tell me there's no changes coming, because if there's no changes coming, then we all might as well go play in oncoming traffic, because that's got a better opportunity of having a different result than this.
Following this match, USMNT would then be forced to rebuild. I guess once you hit rock bottom, the only place to go is up. So today, I am proud to say that the USMNT is backed, ranked number 10 in the top 10 for the first time since 2006. This ranking is honestly quite remarkable, considering on October 10, 2017, our lineup against Trinidad and Tobago looked like this. And in our most recent best 11 showing against Mexico in the CONCACAF Nations League final, our starting 11 looks like this. I think it's easy to say that at this moment in time, I've never been more proud and excited to be a USMNT fan. In terms of the FIFA rankings, this group of players has their eyes on not only ranking higher than 26 US squad, but also at potentially winning a World Cup. I'll let you be the judge. Do you think we'll ever see this USMNT roster take the #1 spot in the FIFA global rankings? Comment below. I mean, who knows? But at least one thing is for certain. After watching this episode of State of Soccer, you know how far we've come. Thank you so much for tuning in to State of Soccer, and until next time, go USMNT.